Good morning in the beautiful Galilee morning. My goodness, I'm hard at work the last 2 days. I've been pruning the trees on the property. I think I have over 30 fruiting trees, or 30 trees, 32 trees I think on the property. Plus, this is on my neighbor's side of the fence. I'm working on this neighbor's side of the fence and their foliage from out of my yard. I mean, it was just drowning. Don't know if you can up there in that telephone line. And I'm trying to get it all cut back and down so I can get some sunlight in the garden. And I'm piling and hauling as I go. So I'm just using a tow strap and laying my limbs out all the same direction and cinching that down and dragging it out of the property because you can't get back in here with a vehicle. It's too forested. But really what I wanted to talk to you about today is a really clear outline of what I look for when I start my calendar, the beginning of the biblical calendar. And I thought that I would just go over some points, and then I will, as I produce the video, I will put the scriptures, the corresponding scriptures in the video that go with what I'm going to say. So the first thing that I look for to know the season has begun is the rains, because we have a rainy season. And the rains are what causes the seeds to grow. People will say, "Nah, there's a window for the barley, and it doesn't matter how little or how much rain you have." Well, it's not true. I've seen years when we didn't have any rain, and the barley looked like a little flat. My goodness, little flat discs. There was really hardly any meat on any of the grains. And then I've seen other years like this year, they're beautiful and plump and fat and robust. So it does. And the temperatures, they don't make a difference, because the Zadok scale or whatever they think that it causes things to happen, equinox, whatever, they say, blah, 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 blah. Well, my understanding from Genesis is that Genesis 2 says that Elohim put the seeds in the earth and the day that he created the heavens and earth. And the recording of the creating of heavens and earth is in Genesis 1. So if we know anything about Elohim, we know he's giving us an order. Otherwise, you can keep Shabbat on any day you want, but he tells us it's the 7th day. Or we can take his calendar of feasts, and we can scramble them around, and we can keep them in any order we want, because it doesn't matter. There's no order. I find, and if you are watching any of the teachings I have done lately, hope to get into this next. I find he is a Elohim of supreme order, and that the order of his creation tells us what we should follow. The seed was in heaven, it was in the earth in the day that Elohim created in the heavens and the earth. And it says, but there was not yet man, so that was outside of the week of creation, and Elohim had not yet caused it to rain. The other thing you should know is my calendar represents Yeshua. It represents what the law is written, what is written in the law. However, it also represents Yeshua. Once I understand what the law is saying, I go off and I try to find out what Yeshua did within that to fulfill that. Because I am thoroughly convinced, if the calendar is prophetic, if the calendar is what gave us Yeshua, the timing of Yeshua, then it's going to be about the timing of Yeshua. And if I can't see Yeshua in what I'm doing, then obviously I have got something wrong with what I am doing. So it's very important for you to know that I don't see Yeshua as doing anything outside of the written law, but I see him as correctly exemplifying the law in what he did. So, for example, there are people who look for barley, who inspect for barley, and they're looking for fields of barley. But the parables of Messiah clearly say that the field represents the world. And Yeshua clearly is said to be the first fruits from the dead that resurrected on Wave Sheaf Day. So in my understanding of things, as Yeshua has demonstrated it, we only need an omer to start, an omer of aviv barley to start the year. I'll show you here. So far, and I'm not near finished this. And this is what I've taken out of the fenced area. Still have a long ways to go, but it's good. Good, honest, hot, hard labor. The next thing I would say to you is that can we go around and collect an omer from several different fields? Well, how does that represent the life of a single man if we're taking our omer from a couple of different fields or a couple of different locations, even within that field? What I am looking for is a cohesive unit of aviv barley from a field that is in the condition called aviv, because there's a verse that talks about, is Yeshua divided? And he is not. So that's the next criteria I have, is understanding that. So recapping here, rain brings the seed, we follow the seed. When the earliest omer in a field is ready in a cohesive unit, 80 square feet approximately, that signals a qualified omer. Now the next question that arises is, do we have to wait until Wave Sheaf Day to take the omer? That's when it's offered, but do we have to wait until then to take that omer? So it's written that in Deuteronomy that at Wave Sheaf Day, you can put the sickle to a very interesting term, the standing grain. And if you look at how that verse is used, it's used as a comparison and contrast in verses where there was barley cut and laying, sheaves cut and laying, that standing grain was amongst grain that had been taken. So that's the first thing. The second thing is when we look at Yeshua as being the first fruits from the dead, and we look at that information that when he rose, the saints rose, and we understand from the language of the scripture we've been given to see clearly by, that a harvest is a severing, and that men are as the grass of the field, and that when you sever grass, it dies. So the harvest is the cessation of life on this earth, whether it is in death or whether it is when he appears. It will be a harvest. And so when we look at the fact that Yeshua was the first fruits from the dead, and that when he died, the graves opened, and when he rose immediately after, the saints rose. Well, those saints were harvested, died before he laid his life down on Passover. So when I look at the symbolism in that, then I can't see that we have to have an omer harvested exactly on Wave Sheaf Day, though I know what Edersheim and the writings of the Rabbinite, the sages say. I know that. But I also can point to you to many areas where they've gotten things wrong because they've changed it with time to guard, as they saw it, to guard people from infringing on that. But I cannot see that we can only begin to harvest all the other omers, which represent people who have passed on. Grains represent the essence of a person who has lived. That we can't take any of the other omers until Wave Sheaf Day, and that all of them have to languish for the sake of one wave sheaf, when in fact it would almost seem that because Yeshua was the last Omer from a time period, when he laid his life down, that because he resurrected, they were able to resurrect. So delaying first fruits from the field of the world, those people who have died in faith, delaying them and saying, oh, you have to lose your first fruits, it has to fall to the ground because we've got to offer that national wave sheaf, and until we do, nothing else can be touched, doesn't have any type of spiritual significance other than loss. So I am of the opinion that apart from Yeshua and the understanding he adds to the law, that we can't really understand the law. There's a guy I highly respect, and he's not a believer in Yeshua. He considers himself a scripturalist, but I've heard even him say that he's returned to some of the writings because there's too many gaps in what's written. And I agree with him. There is too many gaps. And I really think that that's why, as believers, waking up to the Jewishness of our Messiah and wanting to understand his feasts and his timing, and that these things are still given. They were given from when Adam fell. They were given. You can see them with Noah. So that means that they've always been things that belong to Elohim, that were given to his people. Unless we overlay what's written in Torah, in Leviticus, in Deuteronomy, in Numbers, with the actions of Yeshua and the things that are recorded in the New Testament, we end up going off the path and getting lost. So for me, it's vitally important, as I'm looking to begin the beginning of the year, when I'm looking for that first Omer, that I haven't encroached what's written in Numbers, Deuteronomy, Leviticus, and I have put Yeshua over that to understand the timing more perfectly. Which brings us to the condition of the barley. I am looking for what I describe as soft dough, because that's exactly what it feels like, is dough without any moisture, a dry dough. And let's see if we can get one here. Barley always has to be checked. It can't be assumed that it is in any condition. So this is soft dough. And so the barley is not brown when it is in soft dough. That is not the condition I'm looking for. Now, is it a bright, vibrant green? No. In fact, a girlfriend of mine says it's pistachio color, and that's because of some research we've been doing this year. And that's really about the general color that I look for the barley. Like all of this here, this is probably, I would say this is probably dough. Let's check another one. Let me take it off of there. Okay, got it. And let's check it. You can cut it. Yes, that's good. And I can roll it in a ball. There's no moisture in it. That is what I look for. That color, that condition. Because if we go past that condition to something more ripe, we can see that the tip of that is already dropping. So you can't go more ripe than that, because without a doubt, the heads will start shattering from the top down. Also, when I was talking about taking the first fruits when they were ripe, I wasn't speaking about the harvest. I have looked at the verses, and there's a clear pattern that the first fruits are not considered. They have to be harvested, that means severed, but they're not part of the harvest, the field that belongs to the farmer. And so when I was talking about as the first fruits become ripe, I wasn't talking about the farmer doing anything other than presenting his wave sheaf as it became ready, and then the rest had to wait to be harvested until wave sheaf day. That is very clear that the scripture says that. And again, that's supported by the fact that it's called, when you put your sickle to the standing grain, you begin to count. So that going back in scripture and looking at how that is used, it's a very significant phrase that's used to delineate from what had been harvested or what had been bundled in the field, or however, those scriptures had used it. There was other barley in conditions in the field, and there was barley still standing. So Deuteronomy has a very specific idea about when it says you put the sickle to the standing grains, that it's a very specific word. That's about 45 minutes worth of battery on my extension chainsaw, and I could have got a second battery, but that much cutting and hauling in one day is plenty for me. I'll take a break and we'll continue on tomorrow, or I will. This is solo work. I'll continue on tomorrow with getting their yard trimmed up and in shape, so that that'll be done before it gets hot. And the way that I've understood medium dough to be the condition of aviv is by using Exodus 9:31 and 32. Three of the components that are listed there grow in Israel, and that's the barley, the wheat, and the flax. And if I use those scriptures to determine the condition of the barley, and I find a cohesive omer within a field in the land of Israel, then the flax would be blooming, but the barley, the seed, takes preeminence. Okay, just like Colossians 1:18, the seed is preeminent, or Yeshua is preeminent. The flax will be blooming, and when you arrive at Shavuot, the wild wheat that still grows, it's wild now because it grows wildly. It comes back every year, but it is the same wheat that was offered in the first century until the destruction of the first temple. It will be ready for Shavuot. And if the flax and the barley is correct, then the other 5 species will absolutely be in their correct timing. And just one other little final point. If anybody tells you differently than what you've heard from me, it's not true. Check with me and see if I've changed anything.